The enigmatic encounter. The stars stretched endlessly before Jace Calder's small spacecraft. It floated alone in the dark, a tiny speck in the vast galaxy. The hull was scratched and dented from old battles, but Jace didn't mind. He liked the quiet out here, far from crowded human colonies and noisy trade routes. The uncharted fringes were his home, wild, empty, and full of secrets. Tonight, though, the silence broke. A crackle came through his comms. Jace sat up, frowning at the dashboard. The sound wasn't clear, just static mixed with a faint, strange hum. He tapped the controls, trying to boost the signal. Words didn't form, but the hum grew stronger, almost like a voice calling from somewhere far away. His scanners blinked red, pointing to a spot in the void. Something was out there. Jace leaned forward, his hazel eyes narrowing. Most pilots would ignore a signal like that. Unknown sounds in deep space usually meant trouble, pirates, broken ships, or worse. But Jace wasn't most pilots. Where others saw danger, he saw a challenge. He adjusted his course and pushed the throttle. The engines roared as his ship sped toward the source. Minutes passed, and then he saw it, a shape against the stars. It was a ship, but not human-made. Its curves were too smooth, its metal too shiny, glowing faintly blue in the dark. It looked old, abandoned, drifting without power. Jace circled it slowly, scanning for life. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. Yet the signal still hummed through his comms, louder now, pulling him closer. He docked his ship against the stranger's hull. The airlock hissed as it sealed tight. Jace grabbed his pistol and a flashlight, then stepped inside. The alien ship was cold, its walls lined with strange symbols he couldn't read. The air smelled sharp, like burnt metal, and something sweet. He moved carefully, his boots echoing in the silence. Every shadow made his heart beat faster. He wasn't scared. Not yet. But he knew he wasn't alone. The hum led him deeper, down a narrow hall to a sealed chamber. The door was huge, twice his height, and covered in glowing lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jace hesitated. He could turn back now, fly away, and forget this place. But the hum felt alive, tugging at him. He pressed his hand to the door. It shivered under his touch, then slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a faint blue glow. At its center stood a figure, tall, thin, and cloaked in shadow. A long veil hung over its face, hiding everything. Jace froze. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but he felt its presence like a weight on his chest. His flashlight beam danced over the veil, catching hints of shimmering fabric. Whoever, or whatever, this was, it wasn't human. "Who are you?" Jace asked, his voice steady but low. The figure stayed silent. He stepped closer, pistol still in hand. The hum filled the room now, coming from her, he realized. It wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling, wrapping around him, cold and curious. He swallowed hard. "Can you hear me?" The figure tilted its head, just a little. Jace's breath caught. He couldn't see eyes, couldn't see a face, but he knew she was watching him. A chill ran down his spine. Not fear, not exactly, but something deeper, something alive. He opened his mouth to speak again, but a sharp clank stopped him. He spun around, flashlight swinging. The sound came from the hall behind him, metal on metal, heavy and close. His grip tightened on the pistol. The beam caught a glint of something moving fast, then gone. Shadows shifted in the dark. He wasn't alone on this ship, not anymore. Jace turned back to the figure. She hadn't moved, but her stillness felt different now. Tense, waiting. "What's out there?" he asked, his voice sharper. She didn't answer. The clank came again, louder, closer. His scanners beeped in his earpiece. Motion detected, but no life signs. Drones. Traps. He didn't know. The hum from the figure grew stronger, almost pleading. Jace lowered his weapon a fraction, staring at the veil. He didn't understand her, didn't know her story, but something told him she was the key. The ship, the signal, the noise in the dark, it all tied to her. And now, so did he. Stay or run, he muttered to himself, glancing at the door. The clank echoed once more, right outside. He was out of time. The mystery deepens. The veiled princess. Jace Calder stood in the dim chamber, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The veiled figure loomed before him, silent and still, her hum vibrating through the cold air. The clank from the hall rang again, sharp, deliberate, like footsteps on steel. He whipped around, pistol raised, expecting enemies or machines. But what emerged from the shadows wasn't alive, not in the usual way. A swarm of tiny lights floated toward him, hundreds of glowing orbs, no bigger than coins, pulsing with the same blue glow as the ship's walls. They buzzed like insects, darting in tight circles. Jace stepped back, heart pounding. The orbs didn't attack. Instead, they formed a wall between him and the figure, a shimmering shield that hissed with static. He waved his flashlight through them, and they scattered, then reformed, chirping in a high, strange tone. "She controls them," Jace whispered, glancing at the veiled figure. She hadn't moved, but her hand lifted slightly, fingers curling. The orbs shifted, tightening their circle around her. Not prisoners, not guards, something else. Protectors, maybe, or pets. He lowered his pistol, curiosity burning brighter than fear. "What are you?" The figure's head tilted again, slow and careful. Her hum changed, softening into a melody that tugged at his ears. His translator buzzed in his pocket, spitting out broken words. "I am hidden." The voice was faint, layered with echoes, like wind through a cave. Jace frowned. Hidden. From him. From something bigger. He didn't get an answer. The ship groaned suddenly, a deep rumble shaking the floor. Jace stumbled, catching himself against the wall. His scanner screeched. Something massive was out there, closing in fast. He ran to a cracked viewport, peering into the void. A shadow blotted the stars. A jagged ship, bristling with spikes, its engines glowing red. Not human, not friendly. The comms crackled again, but this time, a voice boomed through, harsh and guttural. "Give us the Silent One. Now." The Silent One. Jace turned back to the figure. She shrank slightly, her veil trembling. The orbs buzzed louder, swirling faster around her. "They're after you," he said, piecing it together. She didn't nod, didn't speak, but the hum grew sad, heavy. He stepped closer, ignoring the orb's warning chirps. "Why? What did you do?" Her hand reached out, stopping an inch from his chest. Cold seeped through his jacket, even without touching. The translator buzzed again. "I am danger." Her words hung in the air, sharp and final. Jace's eyes widened. Danger to him, to them. Before he could ask, the enemy ship fired. A streak of light slammed into the hull, rocking the chamber. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Jace ducked, swearing under his breath. The orbs scattered, then raced to the walls, patching cracks with bursts of light. Repairs. He stared, amazed. They weren't just protectors. They were part of the ship, alive in their own way. The veiled figure swayed, her hum faltering. She was tied to them, he realized, and they to her. The enemy voice roared again. "Surrender her, or burn." Jace gritted his teeth. He didn't know her name, didn't know her face, but he knew one thing. Humans don't run from a fight. Not when someone's scared, not when they're cornered. He checked his pistol, then glanced at his own ship docked outside. He could hold them off. For a while, maybe. "You called me here," he said to her, voice firm. "That signal, it was yours, right?" The figure hesitated, then dipped her head, just once. "A yes. Then you've got me now. I'm not leaving." Her hand dropped, and the orbs slowed, their light softening, For a moment, the hum felt warm, almost grateful. Another blast hit, closer this time. Jace braced himself, scanning the room. "We've got trouble coming. Can your lights fight?" She didn't answer, but the orbs pulsed brighter, splitting into two groups. One near her, one near him. A partnership, maybe. He smirked despite the chaos. Good enough. The ship shook harder, metal screaming. Through the viewport, boarding claws extended from the enemy vessel, latching on. They weren't waiting. Jace gripped his weapon, turning to her. "If we're doing this, I need to know. What's worth all this?" Her hum sharpened, urgent. The translator crackled. "My secret kills." Then silence. Jace stared, pulse racing. The orbs flared, ready. Something crashed outside the chamber door. They were here. The stakes rise, a dangerous pact. Jace Calder stood in the trembling chamber, his boots planted firm against the shaking floor. The veiled figure, still nameless, still a mystery, hovered near him, her glowing orbs buzzing like a storm of stars. Outside, the enemy ship loomed closer, its red engines cutting through the dark. The guttural voice blared through the comms again. "Surrender the Silent One, or we carve your ship to dust." Jace clenched his jaw. He didn't like ultimatums. The figure flinched, her veil rippling as if caught in a breeze that wasn't there. The orbs tightened around her, their light flickering fast. Nervous, Jace thought. He glanced at his scanner. The enemy was seconds from locking on. No time to run, no time to think. "They want you bad," he said, turning to her. "Why?" Her hum shifted, low and mournful. The translator in his pocket buzzed, spitting out jagged words. "I am last." She raised a hand, and the orbs parted, revealing a faint shimmer beneath her veil. Not skin, not quite, but something alive, moving like liquid light. Jace blinked, caught off guard. "Last of what?" He pressed. Before she could answer, the ship jolted hard. A blast tore through the outer hull, spraying sparks across the chamber. Jace ducked, shielding his face. The orbs darted upward, weaving a glowing net to seal the breach. They moved like they had minds, fast and sure, but the veiled figure swayed, her hum weakening. She was tied to them deeper than he'd guessed. Every hit on the ship hurt her too. The comms crackled again. No more warnings. Jace saw it through the viewport, spikes on the enemy ship glowing hot, charging for a bigger strike. He cursed under his breath and checked his own ship's controls through the link in his wrist. Shields up, weapons hot. It wasn't much, but it'd buy time. He turned to her. "You called me here. You need me. So talk." Her head dipped, slow and heavy. The orbs pulsed once, bright, then dimmed. Her voice came through the translator, clearer now. "I am Navira. Last of Kelzar." Jace's eyes narrowed. Kelzar. He'd heard whispers of that name, an old empire lost to war, feared even by the galaxy's worst. "They hunt me," she added, her hum trembling. "For my mark." Mark. Jace stepped closer, ignoring the rumble of another blast. The orbs didn't stop him this time. Her hand lifted again, brushing the edge of her veil. Beneath it, a symbol glowed faintly on her chest, not tattooed, not carved, but alive, shifting like a star trapped in her skin. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the orbs. "This wakes the dead," she said. Jace froze. Wakes the dead. He didn't know what that meant. Machines, bodies, something worse. But the way her hum darkened told him it wasn't good. The enemy ship fired again, a beam slicing past, missing by inches. The chamber shook, and Navira stumbled. Jace caught her arm without thinking. It was cold, smooth, not human, but solid. She pulled back fast, veil hiding her again. "They'll kill you for that?" he asked, nodding at the mark. She didn't answer, but the orbs flared, angry now. The translator buzzed. They fear it. Jace smirked despite the chaos. Fear's a good weapon. Can you use it? Her hum paused, then sharpened. Yes, but cost. Before he could ask what cost, a new sound cut through. Metal screeching, claws digging into the hull. The viewport showed it. Boarding pods launching from the enemy ship, black and sharp, aimed straight for them. Jace's scanner screamed. Impact in seconds. He gripped his pistol tighter. Guess we're past talking. Navira straightened, her orbs swirling faster. You stay? She asked, voice small but clear. Jace met her unseen gaze, adrenaline pumping. Humans don't digifight. You've got me, mark or no mark. Her hum softened, almost warm, and the orbs split. Half to her, half to him, hovering like allies. The first pod crashed through the wall, tearing metal like paper. Dark shapes spilled out, tall, armored, with eyes like burning coals. Not drones, not orbs, soldiers, alive and mean. Jace raised his weapon, grinning. Let's see what your fear's made of. Navira's mark pulsed once, bright and wild. The orbs around Jace glowed hotter ready. The soldiers froze, staring at her veil. Something was coming, and Jace was right in the middle of it. The fight, humanity's grit shines. Jace Calder braced himself as the enemy soldiers stormed the chamber. The air crackled with heat from their weapons, long, jagged spears that glowed red at the tips. They were tall, twice his height, with armor like black shells and eyes that burned orange in the dark. The hole they'd torn in the wall smoked behind them, and more pods screeched outside, clawing at the ship. Jace counted 6 already inside, with more coming. Bad odds. He liked that. Navira stood behind him, her veil fluttering, her glowing orbs buzzing like a swarm of angry wasps. The mark on her chest pulsed faintly, a secret Jace still didn't fully grasp. The soldiers stopped short, their coal-hot eyes fixed on her. One growled, voice like grinding stones. The silent one lives. Enter. They raised their spears, but Jace moved first. He dove behind a shattered console, firing his pistol. The shot sparked off their armor, barely scratching it. Tough bastards, he muttered, then yanked a cable from the wall. It sparked in his hand, live with power. He grinned. Humans didn't need fancy weapons. They made do. He tossed the cable at the nearest soldier. It hit, and blue arcs danced across its shell. The soldier roared, staggering, then collapsed, smoke curling from its joints. The others charged. Jace rolled, grabbing a broken metal shard from the floor. He wasn't fast like them, wasn't strong like them, but he was tricky. He slid under one, jamming the shard into a gap in its leg armor. It stumbled, crashing into another. The orbs swooped in then, darting around the soldiers' heads, flashing bright to blind them. Jace glanced at Navira. Nice teamwork, he called. Her hum sharpened, urgent. The orbs weren't just lights. They spat tiny bolts of energy now, stinging the soldiers like needles. Not enough to kill, but enough to annoy. The soldiers swatted at them, distracted. Jace used it. He grabbed a loose panel, heavy and dented, and swung it hard. It smashed a soldier's spear, knocking it free. The weapon skidded across the floor, still glowing. He snatched it up, testing its weight. Hot, awkward, but workable. The lead soldier lunged at Navira, ignoring Jace. Big mistake. He ran forward, driving the stolen spear into its back. The red tip flared, burning through the armor. The soldier shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and fell. Navira stepped back, her orbs circling her tighter. Her mark glowed brighter, wilder, and the air felt thick, heavy with something Jace couldn't name. "What's that?" he asked, panting. She didn't answer, but the translator buzzed. "It stirs." The fallen soldier twitched. Then its armor cracked open, and a shadow leaked out, not blood, not smoke, but something dark and alive, wriggling like a worm. It slithered toward the others, and they froze, spears lowering. Her mark. Wakes, one hissed, stepping back. Jace stared, grip tightening on the spear. Wakes what? The shadow worm reached a living soldier, climbing its leg. The soldier screamed, thrashing, then went still. Its eyes dimmed, and it turned, slowly, toward its own kind. It raised its spear and attacked. Chaos erupted. The soldiers fought each other, confused, shouting in their grinding tongue. Navira's hum faltered. She sank to one knee, the orbs dimming. Jace ran to her, dropping the spear. "You okay?" Her veil hid her face, but her hand shook as it brushed his arm. Cold, weaker than before. The translator whispered, "Cost is me." He frowned. Her mark wasn't just power. It was draining her, maybe killing her. The possessed soldier fell, overwhelmed by the others. The leader spun, pointing at Navira. Her curse spreads. "Take her now." Two charged her, but Jace stepped in front, swinging the panel again. It cracked against a spear, holding them back. "Not today," he growled. The orbs rallied, zapping at their eyes. Outside, the enemy ship fired again. A low boom shook the walls. The leader snarled, retreating to the hole. "We return, with more." It leaped out, vanishing into the pod. The others followed, leaving their dead. Silence fell, heavy and tense. Jace turned to Navira, breathing hard. "Your mark. It's alive, isn't it?" She nodded, slow. The translator buzzed. "It fights for me." He smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Guess we got that in common." The ship groaned. More pods glinted outside. Round 2 was coming. The revelation, a forbidden truth. Jace Calder crouched in the wrecked chamber, catching his breath. The enemy soldiers were gone. For now, leaving behind their dead and the faint hum of Navira's orbs. The air smelled of burnt metal and something sour, like rot. Navira knelt nearby, her veil still hiding her face, her mark glowing dimly beneath it. The shadow worm from the fallen soldier had vanished, but its echo lingered in the silence. Jace wiped sweat from his face and turned to her. "We need to talk." She didn't move, but her orbs slowed, hovering low like tired fireflies. The ship creaked around them, patched by her glowing helpers, but it wouldn't hold long. Jace pointed at the spot where the shadow had crawled. "That thing, your mark. It's not just a weapon, is it?" Her hum softened, almost a sigh. The translator buzzed. "No, it is me." Jace frowned, leaning closer. "You? What does that mean?" Navira's hand lifted, trembling, and traced the air over her chest. The mark pulsed, and for a moment, the veil shimmered, thinner, revealing not skin but a swirl of light, deep and endless, like a tiny galaxy trapped inside her. He blinked, startled. "You're not solid." Her head dipped, slow and heavy. The translator crackled. "I was Kelzar. All of them." Jace's breath caught. All of them. He'd heard the stories. Kelzar, a race of star-shapers, gone in a war no one remembered. "You're saying you're what's left?" She nodded, and the orbs pulsed once, mournful. She stood, unsteady, and the chamber's lights flickered. Her voice came clearer now, pieced together by the translator. "My people made me a vessel to hold us." Jace stared, piecing it together. Her mark wasn't a tattoo or a curse. It was a core, a living archive of her entire species, their minds, their power, burned into her. The shadow worm wasn't random. It was them, waking up. "Why hide it?" he asked, standing too. The orbs circled her tighter, protective. Her hum darkened. "They want it to steal us." She pointed out the viewport, where the enemy ship had retreated, a black speck against the stars. "They broke us once. Now they hunt me. Jace rubbed his neck, mind racing. So that shadow, it's your people fighting back. Her veil fluttered, and the translator buzzed. Yes, but small, weak. I am fading. She sank back to her knees, the orbs dimming further. Jace knelt beside her, frowning. Fading? You mean dying? Her hand brushed the floor, cold and faint. Each fight takes me. Shadows take more. Jace's gut twisted. Every time her mark woke, it pulled from her, her life, her strength. The soldiers hadn't lied about a curse, but it wasn't what they thought. It was a cost she paid to survive. He glanced at his ship through the link in his wrist. Shields were low, but engines still worked. I can get us out. Human space, somewhere safe. Navira's hum paused, uncertain. The translator whispered, safe for you, not me. Jace smirked, stubborn. I dodged worse. You're stuck with me now. Her orbs flared, just a little, like a spark of hope. But then the scanner beeped, sharp, urgent. Jace checked it. A dozen signals, closing fast. The enemy wasn't done. They're back, he muttered, grabbing his pistol. Navira's mark pulsed again, brighter, and a faint shadow flickered at her feet. Not a worm this time, but a shape, humanoid, blurry. It vanished quick. Can you control it? He asked, nodding at the spot. Her hum trembled. Not yet. It chooses. Jace raised an eyebrow. Chooses. That was new and creepy. He liked it. Then let's give it something to pick from. The ship shook as the first enemy pod hit, claws tearing in. Jace stood, offering her a hand. Up for round two. She took it, her touch icy but firm. The orbs rallied, splitting between them again. Her translator buzzed one last time. You dare much. Jace grinned, facing the breach. It's a human thing. Shadows moved outside. Soldiers, ships, a fleet. Navira's mark glowed, and the air hummed with something old, angry, waking up. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The climax, love against the odds. Jace Calder gripped the controls of his battered ship, eyes locked on the viewport. The enemy fleet filled the stars. Dozens of spiked ships, their red engines flaring like wounds in the dark. Pods slammed into the hull, claws tearing deeper with every hit. Inside the chamber, Navira stood beside him, her veil trembling, her orbs buzzing faint and low. Her mark glowed through the fabric, wild and unsteady, a galaxy of light fighting to break free. The air hummed with her fading strength, but Jace wasn't giving up. They're too many, he said, voice tight. His shields flickered, nearly gone. Another blast rocked them, and the orbs darted to patch the walls. Slower now. Navira's hum broke, jagged. The translator buzzed. I can stop them. Jace turned, frowning. How? Her hand lifted, shaking, and rested on his arm. Cold seeped through his sleeve, but it felt alive, desperate. I give all, she said. The mark pulsed brighter, and shadows flickered at her feet. Not one, not a worm, but many, shifting shapes of her lost people, whispering in a tongue he couldn't hear. Jace's eyes widened. All. You mean? She nodded, slow. Me and them. The translator crackled. We become storm. Jace stared, heart pounding. She wasn't just a vessel. She was a fuse, ready to burn out with her species' last spark. A weapon no one could stop, not even her. He grabbed her hand firm. You'll die. Her hum softened, warm for the first time. You live. The orbs circled them both, glowing fierce, like they agreed. Jace shook his head. Stubborn. Not without you. He'd fought too hard, seen too much, to let her fade alone. The fleet fired, a barrage of red beams closing in. No dodging, no running. Jace squeezed her hand tighter. Do it your way. But I'm staying. Navira's veil fluttered, and the mark erupted. Light poured out, not just from her chest, but her whole body, blinding, alive. The shadows at her feet grew tall. Warriors, builders, children. Kelzar reborn, not as worms, but as ghosts made solid. The chamber shook as her powers spilled out. Through the viewport, Jace saw it, a wave of light and shadow bursting from the ship, racing toward the fleet. It wasn't loud, wasn't fire. It was quiet, heavy, like a tide swallowing the stars. The enemy ships froze mid-attack, their red glows dimming. Pods stopped clawing. Soldiers inside the hull dropped their spears, staring blank, caught in something they couldn't fight. The shadows moved, fast, silent, slipping into the enemy ships like smoke. Screens flickered, engines stalled. One ship turned, firing on its own fleet. Then another. Chaos spread, red beams cutting their own hulls apart. Navira's hum rose, a song now fierce and sad. The orbs spun around her, dissolving into the light, giving everything. Jace shielded his eyes, but he didn't look away. She was beautiful, not a face, not a form, but a force, raw and endless. The Kelzar shadows danced in the wave, tearing the fleet apart, ship by ship. Pods drifted, empty. The lead vessel cracked in half, spilling wreckage into the void. Then silence. The light faded. Navira sank, her veil dark again, her mark dull. Jace caught her before she hit the floor, her body light, fragile, like glass about to break. You did it, he said, voice rough. The orbs were gone, the shadows gone. The fleet was rubble floating in the dark. Her hand brushed his cheek, barely there. The translator buzzed, weak. You dared. Jace smirked, holding her close. Told you, humans don't quit. Her hum flickered, faint but real. She wasn't gone, not yet. The mark pulsed once, soft, a spark holding on. Outside, a lone pod broke free, speeding away. Survivors, maybe with a story to tell. Jace didn't care. He checked his ship, battered, but alive. We're getting out, he said, lifting her gently. You and me. Her veil shifted, and for a moment, he swore he felt her smile, even if he couldn't see it. The stars stretched ahead, quiet again. The fight was over, but the war wasn't. Jace set the course, one hand on the controls, one on her. Whatever came next, they'd face it, together. The resolution, a new beginning. Jace Calder sat at the helm of his scourged ship, the stars streaking past in long, silver lines. The enemy fleet was gone, shattered into drifting husks by Navira's storm of light and shadow. The chamber behind him was quiet now, the hum of her orbs replaced by the soft rumble of his engines. Navira rested nearby, slumped in a seat he'd rigged from spare parts. Her veil hung still, her mark a faint glow, barely alive. She'd given everything, almost too much, but she was here, with him. He glanced at her, hand steady on the controls. You're tougher than you look, he said, half smiling. Her hum flickered, weak but there, like a candle refusing to die. The translator buzzed. You? Pull me back. Jace raised an eyebrow. Back? From what? The storm, he guessed. Her power had nearly swallowed her whole, her people's ghosts taking her with them. But he'd held on, and that mattered. The ship's scanners beeped, clear for now. No pods, no signals. The lone survivor had fled, probably screaming about the human and the silent one who broke their fleet. Jace didn't mind. Let them talk. He set a course for human space, not the crowded colonies, but a quiet outpost he knew, a place to hide and breathe. We'll figure this out, he told her. You and me. Navira shifted, her hand brushing the seat. The mark pulsed once, and something new happened. A faint shimmer rose from it. Not a shadow or a worm, but a shape. It was small, blurry, like a child made of mist, standing between them. Jace blinked, startled. "What's that?" Her hum warmed, soft. The translator buzzed. "Them. Waking. Slow." He stared at the misty figure. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him with empty eyes. "Your people?" he asked. She nodded, slow. "One. Of many. I hold still." Jace leaned back, processing. Her mark wasn't just a weapon or a curse, it was a seed. A piece of Kelzar waiting to grow again. The storm had burned most of it, but not all. Something stayed, alive in her. "That why they hunted you?" he said, nodding at the shimmer. "To stop this." Her hum sharpened, firm. "Yes. And take." The misty child faded, sinking back into her mark. Jace smirked. Guess we're guarding a future now. He liked that. Humans were good at building from scraps, and Nevera was more than scrap. She was a chance. The ship rattled, patched but holding. Jace pulled a crate close, digging out a spare jacket. He draped it over her, careful not to touch the mark. "Rest," he said. "I've got this." Her veil tilted, and the translator buzzed. "You teach me trust." He chuckled. "You teach me crazy. Fair trade." Hours passed. The stars grew familiar. Human territory, rough and loud, but home. Jace tapped the comms, sending a coded ping to the outpost. No details, just a signal. Calder's back. Got cargo. They'd ask questions later, and he'd dodge them. Navira wasn't cargo. She was a partner, even if she didn't know it yet. Her hum shifted, curious. "Where we go." Jace glanced at her. "Somewhere loud, messy, human. You'll hate it." The translator buzzed. "I'd learn." He grinned. She was stubborn too. Good. They'd need that. The outpost came into view. A junk heap of metal and lights, floating in the void. Ships buzzed around it, traders and scavengers, all too busy to care about one more drifter. Jace docked smooth, engines sighing as they powered down. He stood, offering her a hand, ready for noise. She took it, standing slow. Her mark glowed a little brighter, steady now. The misty shape didn't return, but Jace felt it, something waiting, growing. "You stay?" she asked, voice soft through the translator. He nodded. "Told you, humans don't quit. Neither do you." They stepped out, her veil catching the outpost's harsh lights. Voices shouted nearby, engines roared, but Navira didn't flinch. She leaned on him, just a little, and he guided her forward. The galaxy still hunted her. He knew one pod had escaped, and stories spread fast. But here, with him, she had time. Time to heal. Time to wake what slept in her mark. The stars watched, silent, a human and a remnant, walking into the chaos. A new fight loomed, but not today. Today, they'd won.